Hi Gemini, welcome to a video on the transit of Jupiter in Capricorn, which is occurring from December 2nd of 2019 until December 18th of 2020. And so for you, this is going to be the 8th house. And this is a very interesting house for Gemini to experience such a strong influence from because, well, it's funny because I was going to say, oh, this is interesting, but you've already been experiencing it, come to think about it, in a big way, because Pluto has been in this sector. Now, Pluto rules the 8th house, so it's at home there, but it may not feel at home for a Gemini to have Pluto in Capricorn in this psychological house, because it's about probing the depths of your psyche. And I would, look at it not just your actual psyche in terms of the mundane version of psychology, but the spiritual aspect to it too. This is the house of the shadow. I don't know if Carl Jung talked about that. I'm sure that was one of the things. He may have called it, oh, there is a word. I can't think of it. Oof. But anyway, that part of us that we disavow. And I think that, some people do this more than others, or certain signs do it. Gemini is an analytical sign. And so that you're very, into that. But emotions are something that are a mixed bag for you, because the classic Gemini person wants to be analytical versus emotional. And that keeps things at bay so that you don't have to feel them directly. Now, why is this? Is this because Geminis are heartless POSs? No. This has more to do with the desire for freedom. I am the opposite sign of you. I'm a Sagittarian, and I would put us in the same camp, although fire signs tend to be more emotional in their own way, passionate, if you will. And so they come across sometimes as emotional versus the cool intellect of an air sign like a Gemini. And if you have inner planets in Cancer, you may be the type of people who write to me whenever I say things like that and read me the riot act. That's okay. I can handle it. But the thing is that when I talk about signs, I'm not talking about everything, I was going to say smushed together, all of the different influences mixed together. I'm strictly speaking of the archetypes of, that are based on each sun sign and how they play out in terms of their characteristics. That's it. And we have to talk in absolutes in order to really get the message across. The more you go, well, it might be, it could be, but I like to be straightforward about that. So, needless to say, you've already been dealing with a lot of deep probing within yourself. If you have been adverse to this, the universe will find a way of like flinging it in your face, and that isn't pretty, because in those instances, it's kind of like if you avoid a certain situation because it's too painful. Repressed memories are actually the mind or the organism's way of, buffering against traumatic experiences. It's just amazing how we have these coping mechanisms, or they're even like not even something that we employ ourselves. They're just kind of almost instinctual. They're automatic. So there are times when this is absolutely the right thing for the person to do, because they need time to process everything that happened that is so hard to wrap their brains around. Okay? But then it becomes a habit where the person, runs away from having to deal with things. The eighth house is the house of sexuality, especially sex magic. I've been saying that a lot lately because I read it somewhere and I thought that was such a great way. This is more of the spiritual sex and the recreational sex of the fifth house. I once had an argument with somebody online about, the difference between the expression of sex in the sixth, the fifth, and the eighth. And, I think that person had a point, all these years later, that perhaps I wasn't aware of at the time. But the thing is, it's also the house of metaphysics, and the shadow that I'm talking about is all of those feelings that are very hard to kind of cop to, or even deal with in a very direct way, because they're so fraught with emotion. I don't know how many Gemini people out there get jealous. It's not a common trait among Gemini, but yet again, you might have your Venus in Taurus or in Cancer, and all bets may be off. You may be naturally non-possessive, and that's the one area where you go a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, is when you're in a one-on-one romantic relationship. Other than that, you're cool, you're not jealous or anything like that. We are complicated individuals, so we're not going to just fall very neatly into one template or another. But this is a great opportunity for you, or it has been with Pluto in this house, for you to really understand what makes yourself tick. Maybe you have been in psychotherapy, Gemini. I think Gemini would be or likes psychotherapy, actually, because they get to kind of be analyzed, and then they start to analyze their own feelings, slap labels on themselves, and kind of get away from that intense emotion that comes up when you're doing that type of work. But the other things that are connected to this house are shared resources. This is the house of the money that comes to you from sources that are not connected to you having to work for it. So when Jupiter comes in this house, and Jupiter can be attached to money, it could be like an inheritance. It could be like any kind of money that you get from something that you have to cash in, like a insurance policy or whatever, things along those lines. And if you have debt, you may get enough money from from the universe, if you will, that you can pay off your debt. Can be a great time to receive loans, and like whether it's student loans or business loans or what have you. But anyway, the other thing, when I was talking about sex, what I was really getting at is intimacy. And this can be a time when you have multiple opportunities to practice this. And perhaps there are other things that go along with this. Maybe you're going to be taking some kind of a course that trains you to work with others to access their I don't know, like, well, I was, Akashic Records, I think would be more of the 12th house, but maybe something with channeling, because the 8th house is the house of the dead. So if you're doing any kind of psychic work, it could be like with entities that have crossed over that are still available. Maybe they are volunteering to come through you if you have this ability at this time, and this may be something that you develop or you get the opportunity to develop, and you're like doing this, and in some cases you could be doing it for a living. There may even be some of you in this 10 years that Pluto has been here that have been delving into these types of topics. The 8th house is the house of the occult, which apparently includes astrology and the tarot. The tarot, I feel, really goes along with the occult, because the symbolism can be a bit stark, can be, something that we would associate with, well, anytime that you have symbolism, there, to me, it can indicate the occult, because occult means hidden. And that's what symbols can be all about, where they appear to suggest one thing, but there's a deeper meaning. And it's not for everyone to get. Now, it's interesting because I've been thinking about this idea of knowledge not being available to all people. That doesn't sit well with me. I think that that goes back to this concept of the elite, that trying to control everything, trying to control the information flow, so that the average person doesn't have that understanding, and they can't be fully free because they're kind of beholden to the organized religion heads of, whatever religion it is, these clergy and what have you. And that's what separates, I think, the 8th from the 9th houses. I think the 9th house are more of these systems that are on the overt level. And the 8th house is more of the mysteries of the universe, the conspiracy theories of life. And my sun is in the 8th house in my natal chart, so I eat those up with a big spoon because I really love that kind of thing. Now, some of you may be more into mysteries now than you have been in the past. Actually, since Gemini to me is the ultimate sign of the writer, you would be, well advised, if you have something that you would like to write about, to perhaps write mysteries. Maybe this is the time when you would be most inspired for that. Getting back to the idea of the occult, this may be more appealing to you. This may have been more appealing to you. You have had Saturn in this sector for the last couple of years. That could have also created some kind of situation where your spouse did not earn as much money recently, and the burden fell on you. Jupiter should help with that, and Jupiter could be, in some cases, that your spouse gets a raise, or if they were out of work, that they get a job, and so now you're kind of like blessed from a what I would call kind of like a indirect way, and that can be very helpful for you as well. So in terms of intimacy, like I said, this is the area that things may feel more comfortable for you to do this. And by intimacy, I'm ultimately referring to trusting somebody enough to open up to them fully, and also helping others to shed their trust issues. So if this has some kind of a therapeutic bent to it, that's always a possibility. But you may just be helping other people in some way, and that helps you by doing so. In terms of the way that this is going to play out for you, there's going to be a couple of Jupiter and Pluto conjunctions in 2020, and this can be something that really empowers you from a psychological point of view or a spiritual point or philosophical spiritual perspective. Pluto can be about power, and Jupiter is about the optimism, the bigger picture of the situation, and so seeing beyond it. And perhaps it does have some connection to death. So let's say a Gemini person is a psychologist already. Maybe they're going to get a bereavement counseling training or something, and then they can do that. And or what do they call that? Hospice. Maybe working in a hospice setting. If you have those kinds of like, let's say you're a nurse or something, or even a volunteer. I mean, this doesn't have to be something where you're getting paid, but you gain so much from it, with Jupiter in this house. It's like it multiplies your blessings. So the two times when this conjunction is the most powerful, one of them is around March 29th until April 5th, and there's some dates around that are also going to be in conjunction as well. This is the tightest conjunction. And then in November of 2020, from November 8th until the 13th. And at the second one, this is after both of these planets have retrograded. So the first conjunction, they will be at 24 degrees of Capricorn, and then the ones in November will be at 22 degrees. So they're still, when they're coming back up to speed after having gone retrograde. But this can empower you in this area. And perhaps, like I said, there can even be a monetary gain with the connection to shared resources. Okay, Gemini, that's what I have for you. If you'd like a personal reading, the link to my website is in the description box. Take care. Bye.